The vastness of space stretched endlessly, an abyss of dark voids punctuated by pinpricks of distant stars. To the Xyrillian consortium, the galaxy was their playground, a domain they had explored, conquered, and catalogued for millennia. Advanced beyond imagination, their civilization had brushed aside every challenge they had encountered, subduing every world, every species that dared to resist their influence. The galaxy had long been in balance. Until now. Captain Velos stood on the bridge of the Aranfal, a sleek, angular vessel designed for exploration and intelligence gathering. The crew moved in calculated precision, their many eyes focused on the vast array of holographic displays flickering in front of them. But despite the flawless operation of the ship, something was off. A single anomaly, insignificant on its own, had caught Velos's attention. A signal, not from a nearby star or a known source, but from a forgotten sector of the galaxy, a lonely system that had once been charted and abandoned. Earth. It was a name that meant little to anyone except those in the oldest of Xyrillian records, and even then, it was dismissed as the home of primitive life. Nothing of consequence. Yet here it was again, pulsing intermittently across the void. The signal had no identifiable origin. It was nothing like the sophisticated communications or quantum signatures they were accustomed to detecting. It was irregular, erratic, and oddly familiar. "Captain," a voice broke through the quiet murmur of the command center. It was Rolthor, the chief communications officer. "The signal is coming from Earth. It's been there for centuries, lying dormant, but it's awakening." Velos's brow furrowed. Earth. That planet was nothing more than a relic, forgotten in the galactic records as an inconsequential speck. He had heard stories, old tales of humanity's once promising potential, but those were nothing more than myths passed down from the first explorers, long since discarded as fanciful imaginings. Yet here was undeniable proof that someone, or something, on Earth had created a signal, one sophisticated enough to catch the attention of an advanced race like the Xyrillians. "How long has this signal been active?" Velos inquired, his voice calm but laced with a thread of suspicion. "Over 1,000 years, Rolthor responded, his voice wavering. "It fluctuates, but there's a pattern in the noise. It's purposeful, almost as if it's trying to communicate." Velos leaned forward, his alien eyes narrowing. A first wave of doubt started creeping into his mind. A primitive planet, so far from the centers of civilization, yet sending signals that could pierce the vast distances of space. It didn't add up. The Xyrillian archives were filled with records of countless species, all of whom had long since vanished, incapable of anything beyond their own limited worlds. Yet here was Earth, sending a signal that felt like a challenge, like a warning. He turned to his second-in-command, Galactic, a skilled strategist and expert in interspecies relations. "Prepare a recon mission. I want to know exactly what's going on down there." Galactic's tendrils twitched as he processed the order. "Captain, if this signal is what it appears to be, this could be a significant discovery, or a very dangerous one. Earth has been classified under primitive quarantine for centuries. We know nothing about the humans beyond old, incomplete data. Exactly why we need to investigate." Velos said, "We've been overconfident in assuming this planet is irrelevant. This signal might be the key to something we've missed. I want a team ready to investigate in 2 hours. No more delays." The crew worked quickly, their movements fluid, instinctual. But even as they readied for departure, Velos couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his chest. There was something different about Earth, something he couldn't quite place. As the Aranfal prepared to leave orbit, Velos took one last look at the holographic map of the galaxy, his eyes lingering on the small blue dot in the corner, the Earth. There were no records of alien interference on the planet in recent times. No sign of invasion, no sign of an ancient race that had once ruled it. Just silence. But that silence had been broken, and Velos couldn't ignore the creeping sense of unease. "Prepare for hyperspace jump," Velos ordered, his voice steady but his mind racing. "Let's find out who, or what, has been hiding on Earth all along." The crew, unaware of the monumental discovery that lay ahead, began their calculations. The ship powered up, the stars outside the viewport blurring as they prepared to embark on a journey that would change everything. The Aeronthal glided through the black void, its sleek hull cutting through space with silent precision. The journey to Earth would take several days, but to Captain Velos, it felt like an eternity. His mind churned with unanswered questions, and his thoughts were a whirlwind of suspicion and intrigue. What could a species from this isolated, primitive world have that warranted their attention? And why had their signal remained dormant for so long? On the bridge, the atmosphere was tense, the crew working in near silence. The usual hum of activity was replaced by an undercurrent of uncertainty. Velos glanced toward the holo display, which now flickered with images of Earth, rotating slowly, a seemingly insignificant speck in the vastness of the galaxy. "Captain," Ralthor's voice cut through the stillness, "I've been reviewing the historical data on Earth. It doesn't match what we were told." Velos turned toward him, the holographic map of Earth still spinning in midair. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone sharp with curiosity. "The data we have is fragmented at best," Ralthor continued. "The humans, despite their seeming insignificance, have a long and complicated history. Wars, plagues, and natural disasters. Yet somehow, they always survive. They adapt, change, and rebuild. There are records of entire civilizations rising, only to collapse. But even after devastation, they come back." Velos narrowed his eyes, his fingers brushing the edge of his console. "Survival is common across the galaxy. Most species have faced extinction at some point in their development." "True," Ralthor said, his tone hesitant. "But what's different about them is the pattern. There's something remarkable about how the humans have always found a way to overcome insurmountable odds. There's a strange resilience in their species, Captain. It's as if their very nature is built to rise from the ashes." Velos's mind began to sharpen, intrigued by the implications of Ralthor's words. He had seen countless species in his travels, some beautiful, some terrifying, but none quite like this. Humanity's ability to rebound from destruction was no ordinary survival instinct. It suggested something more, something dangerous. "Let's see what else we can find," Velos ordered, his voice cutting through the thickening tension. "Dive deeper into their archives." Jalek, the strategist, initiated a deep scan of humanity's historical records, pulling data from Earth's most ancient sources. Holographic projections of human civilizations began to appear, flashing before them. Images of massive city-states, once powerful empires, and massive societal upheavals. Then, a chilling realization emerged. Despite all their wars, their strife, the destruction that had ravaged entire populations, Earth had never fallen into true oblivion. It had always rebuilt, always moved forward. One record caught Velos's eye, a series of ancient texts from a civilization known as the Greeks, dating back thousands of years. The texts spoke of legendary figures, warriors who rose against insurmountable odds. Alexander the Great, who carved a vast empire from nothing. The Romans, who forged an entire civilization through sheer tenacity. But it wasn't the names or events that caught Velos' attention. It was a single phrase that echoed through their history. "We will not be undone." As the data continued to pour in, the truth became undeniable. Every time humans were pushed to the brink of extinction, they found a way to adapt. They learned. They innovated. They fought back. No matter how many times they were brought to the edge of oblivion, they returned stronger. "Captain," Jalek spoke up, his voice tinged with disbelief, "I think I've found something critical." Velos approached the console, his curiosity piqued. A series of cryptic symbols appeared on the display, an ancient language, thought to be dead for centuries. It was a message from humanity's earliest ancestors, carved into stone long before the rise of the empires they had just analyzed. The message spoke of a mysterious entity, the last war, a final conflict that would determine whether humanity would rise to dominance or vanish forever. The record suggested that humanity had faced total destruction in the past, yet against all odds, they had survived. Why would they leave such a record? Velos muttered under his breath. If they were as primitive as we've been told, why would they leave such a warning behind? Ralther responded, his voice steady. It could be a testament to their unyielding will, or perhaps a reminder to themselves that no matter the odds, they cannot be destroyed. Velos stepped back from the console, his eyes burning with newfound understanding. This wasn't just a species struggling to survive. This was a species that was built to endure, no matter the cost. And now, it seemed, they were ready for something far greater than anyone had realized. Humanity wasn't just hiding. They were preparing. Continue the scan, Velos ordered. I want everything we can find about these last wars. If Earth has been hiding its true potential, it's time we learn everything about it. As the data streamed in, Velos couldn't shake the feeling that this planet, this so-called primitive world, was hiding something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Oronthal entered Earth's orbit with a soft hum, the immense blackness of space, now giving way to the swirling blue and green of the planet below. Captain Velos stood before the viewport, his sharp alien eyes scanning the world beneath. The beauty of the planet was undeniable, but it was the hidden dangers that concerned him now. This was no longer a mission of exploration. It had become something much larger. The Exarillion Consortium had underestimated Earth, and now they would pay the price. Velos turned to his crew, his voice calm but authoritative. Prepare for deployment. We've come here to test the humans, to understand their true nature. This is not just an investigation. This is an opportunity to see if they are as dangerous as we suspect. His words echoed in the silent room. The crew, though still uncertain, acknowledged their captain's orders with swift professionalism. The plan was set. They would release a controlled threat, an engineered predator capable of testing humanity's resilience. The creature would be deployed into a remote, uninhabited region of the planet. There, it would challenge the humans' survival instincts, forcing them to either adapt or perish. The creature was a masterpiece of genetic engineering, a blend of the deadliest qualities of the universe's most lethal beasts. It had razor-sharp claws, a serpentine body, and heightened senses capable of detecting even the slightest movement. It was designed to overwhelm, to destroy, and to make its prey surrender or flee. Target coordinates are set, Jalek reported. The predator will be released in a wilderness region, far from any significant population centers. We'll monitor it closely to observe their response. Velos nodded, his eyes dark with resolve. Let's see how they react. Release the creature. A command was given, and the creature was unleashed. Below, on Earth's surface, the world seemed unaware of the coming danger. Life continued as usual. Farmers working fields, families walking through parks, children playing in the streets. For a moment, it seemed like the perfect world, untouched and serene. But this calm would not last. The predator descended into the wilderness, its senses alive and alert. The creature's first steps shook the earth, its massive claws sinking into the soil as it moved through the dense forest. It emitted a low guttural growl, a sound that echoed through the trees. Its hunting instincts were sharp, its mind singularly focused on one thing: finding prey. Back aboard the Oronthal, Velos and his crew watched closely, the creature's movements tracked by their sophisticated sensors. The team was ready to intervene if necessary, but they were confident that this test would go as planned. Earth's primitive inhabitants were no match for a creature of this caliber. However, as the predator stalked deeper into the wilderness, something unexpected happened. The first sign came when a small group of humans, farmers by the looks of it, spotted the beast. They had no advanced weapons, no real training. They were just ordinary people, living simple lives. Yet, instead of running or hiding, they gathered quickly. They spoke in hushed tones, their expressions grim but determined. Velos leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What are they doing? Rolfer's fingers flew over his console. They've begun preparing. It appears they're gathering tools. Axes, ropes, even farming equipment. They're organizing. This was not what Velos had expected. The humans were not running in fear. Instead, they were facing the predator with a calm, methodical resolve. It was an instinctual reaction, an understanding that survival required more than just hiding. They were planning, adapting. The Xerillian captain could feel a sense of unease building. What kind of species was this? They had no advanced technology, yet their ability to improvise and react under pressure was something Velos had never seen before in any other species. The humans didn't just sit back and wait for the predator to find them. They took the fight to it. They worked together in perfect synchrony, using their environment to set traps, creating barriers, and driving the creature into a narrow ravine. It was nothing short of a tactical ambush. The predator, for all its strength, was caught off guard. It fought fiercely, but the humans were relentless. They managed to subdue it, not with brute force, but through cleverness and teamwork. They used ropes to bind it, pulling it into a confined space where its strength was neutralized. Velos watched in stunned silence. He had expected to witness a massacre, a demonstration of the creature's superiority. Instead, he had witnessed something far more troubling. Humans weren't just survivors. They were problem solvers. And when cornered, they didn't back down. They found a way to win. This is not possible, Jalek muttered under his breath. This level of coordination, this ingenuity, they shouldn't be able to do this. Velos' expression hardened. He could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. What did we unleash? Velos whispered, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and dread. The test was far from over. But one thing had become painfully clear. Earth's inhabitants were far more capable than the Xerillians had ever imagined. The Aranthal hovered in orbit above Earth, its sleek form casting a shadow over the sprawling landscape below. Inside the ship, Captain Velos paced restlessly, the events of the past few hours swirling in his mind. He could still see the image of the humans, their faces set with grim determination as they faced the predator. What should have been an easy victory for the creature had instead turned into a humiliation. And now, Velos found himself questioning everything he had believed about this planet and its people. Jalek was the first to speak, his voice uneasy. Captain, I've been analyzing the data from the encounter. The humans, they outperformed our expectations in every way. Not only did they survive, but they displayed advanced problem-solving capabilities, improvising traps, coordinating their efforts without any formal structure. This was no accident. I know, Velos replied, his voice tight with frustration. I saw it too. The Xerillians had designed the predator to be a test, an easy victory to show the humans' inferiority. Instead, it had been the humans who emerged victorious. They had proven themselves adaptable, resourceful, and dangerous in ways Velos hadn't anticipated. Their ability to think quickly, to work together despite their primitive technology, was unsettling. The Aranthal sensors had detected no evidence of advanced tactics or high-tech weaponry, but there had been something else, something far more deadly. What does this mean? Rolfer asked, his voice laced with unease. The humans are capable of overcoming challenges with nothing more than raw instinct and intelligence. They have no right to be this powerful. Velos stopped pacing and turned to face his crew. His expression was grim, a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. I'm starting to wonder if we've underestimated Earth's potential. These humans, they don't just survive. They evolve. They learn. They adapt faster than any species I've ever encountered. But they're not a threat, Jalek interjected. Not in the traditional sense. They have no empire, no military might. Their technology is primitive. Velos's eyes narrowed. That's the problem. Galactic. They have nothing, yet they've survived everything the galaxy has thrown at them. They faced their own extinction time and time again, and yet they keep coming back. And they're not just surviving. They're thriving. We saw it with the Predator. They didn't fight it with brute force. They outsmarted it. A long silence fell over the room. It was as though everyone aboard the Aeronfall was grappling with a new reality. The humans, once thought to be insignificant, were proving to be something entirely different. But what did that mean for the Tyrillian mission? What were they truly facing? We've been told Earth is a relic, a backwater planet with no significant influence, Velos muttered, his voice distant. But what if we've been wrong all this time? What if Earth has been deliberately hidden? What if this planet was quarantined, not because it was weak, but because it was too dangerous? The room fell into a heavy silence. Ralthor's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Are you suggesting that Earth is some kind of hidden threat? That we've been keeping our distance from it for a reason? Velos nodded, the realization hitting him with full force. Yes, think about it. Every time humans faced annihilation, they found a way to rebuild, to come back stronger. They've survived wars, plagues, invasions, and yet they've never stopped. They always push forward. Perhaps the real reason Earth has been hidden is not because they're weak, but because they're far too dangerous to be left unchecked. But why haven't they risen to galactic power? Galactic asked, his voice filled with skepticism. If they're as dangerous as you claim, why haven't they spread beyond their own world? That's exactly it, Velos replied, his gaze distant. They haven't spread. They've been isolated. Perhaps they were kept in check, left to evolve without interference. But now that they're sending signals, now that they found a way to break free from their isolation, we're forced to reckon with the possibility that they might rise. And when they do, they won't just survive. They'll dominate. A tense silence filled the bridge. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, their earlier confidence wavering. Velos could feel the weight of the truth settling over them all. They had unleashed a test they believed would be simple, but they had just witnessed humanity's greatest strength, their ability to rise against impossible odds. And now, the question wasn't whether the humans would rise. It was whether the galaxy could survive once they did. Captain, Ralthor said after a long pause, what do we do now? Velos straightened, his expression hardening with determination. We learn everything we can. We study them. And then we decide. Are they an ally we can trust, or a threat we must neutralize? His voice was cold, filled with the weight of a decision that would alter the fate of not only Earth, but the entire galaxy. As the Aeronfall lingered in orbit, a dark new reality began to take shape. The humans weren't just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Exarillion Consortium was about to face a challenge unlike any they had ever known. The days that followed were filled with tense analysis and careful observation. Velos stood in the command center of the Aeronfall, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of Earth below. His mind was racing, calculating, assessing. The humans were proving to be a far more complex species than any of them had imagined. The predator they had unleashed had been subdued not through brute force, but with ingenuity, unity, and a cold, tactical resolve. Captain, we've detected more unusual patterns, Ralthor reported, his voice tinged with the urgency of the new data streaming in. The humans are communicating across their planet in ways that we've never seen before. It's primitive, yes, but it's growing rapidly. They're organizing, forming alliances. Velos's eyes narrowed. Forming alliances. With what? Ralthor hesitated before responding. Not just with each other, Captain. They are reaching out to their own ancient technologies, their forgotten archives. Some of them are even attempting to decode remnants of long-lost languages, trying to decipher old artifacts and reverse engineer advanced concepts they barely understand. It was a startling revelation. Earth's inhabitants, once thought to be shackled by their primitive technology, were beginning to tap into something deeper, something far more powerful. It was as if they had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken, to rise. They're not just surviving. They're evolving, Jalek added, his voice filled with disbelief. They're absorbing knowledge at a staggering rate, and they're making rapid strides toward developing advanced tools, weapons, and systems. Velos felt a chill run through him. He had once thought of Earth as a planet of no consequence, a relic of a bygone age. But now, it was becoming clear that the humans had been waiting for something, a catalyst to unlock their potential. And that catalyst had come in the form of the Aeronthal's unwitting test. "Deploy the observation drones," Velos ordered, his voice clipped. "We need to know exactly what they're doing. If they're tapping into their ancient technologies, we cannot allow them to progress unchecked." The crew worked quickly, sending out specialized drones designed to remain undetected by human technology. They would silently monitor Earth's surface, recording every movement, every development, and transmitting data back to the ship. As the drones gathered information, the Exarilians observed with growing unease. Humans, with their primitive tools and scattered knowledge, were making unprecedented progress. They were beginning to understand and reverse engineer technology from centuries past, technology that, if perfected, could rival anything the Exarilians had ever seen. "What are they after?" Ralther asked, unable to mask his growing concern. Velos's gaze hardened. "They're trying to unlock the key to their own ascension. These humans, they've always been on the edge of something great, something more than we realized. And now they're ready to take that leap." The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just rising from the ashes of their past. They were preparing to forge a new future. They were awakening a force that had been dormant for centuries, and the Exarilians had no idea what that future would look like. The drones soon revealed an unexpected development. Humanity was beginning to uncover ancient star maps, relics of long-forgotten civilizations, and artifacts that hinted at technologies far beyond their current capabilities. They had no way of knowing where this knowledge had come from or who had left it behind, but it was becoming increasingly clear that humans were no longer isolated in their ignorance. "We're too late," Jalek muttered, his tone grim. "They'd started. They're learning faster than we can keep up." Velos felt a sense of urgency building. The time for subtle observation was over. Earth's inhabitants were no longer a simple curiosity. They were a rapidly rising power, one that would soon be capable of challenging even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. "We need to make contact," Velos said suddenly. His voice was resolute, but beneath it was an undercurrent of apprehension. "Not just to observe them, but to understand what they're becoming. We must learn what drives them, what they want, and whether they are an ally or a threat." He turned to face his crew, his expression stern. "Prepare for an open transmission. I want to speak with them. We will face them head-on, and we will see whether we can coexist, or whether this will become a war." Jalek nodded, his expression filled with the weight of the moment. "We've underestimated them for so long, but now we have no choice. We must face humanity as they truly are, a rising force in the galaxy." The crew worked quickly, setting up a direct communication channel with Earth. Velos knew this was a gamble, a dangerous move. But the humans were no longer just a distant curiosity. They were a force that could no longer be ignored, and he had to find out whether they would stand as an ally or a rival. The atmosphere aboard the Aeronthal was thick with tension as Captain Velos stood before the communication console. His eyes were fixed on the shimmering interface, the transmission sequence ready to be initiated. The decision to make contact with humanity had been a difficult one, but the Exarilian captain knew there was no turning back now. The humans had shown they were far more than primitive beings, and he had to understand what they truly wanted before the galaxy was forced to reckon with them. "Are we ready, Captain?" Ralther asked, his voice heavy with apprehension. Velos nodded, his fingers hovering over the console's activation buttons. The weight of the moment hung in the air. This would be the first direct communication with Earth, and it would set the course for everything that followed. "We are," Velos replied. "Open the channel." The console flickered to life, the transmission humming as it bridged the gap between the Aeronthal and the unknown world below. The crew watched intently, waiting for the response. It wasn't long before the human signal cracked through, static briefly interrupting the connection. Then it cleared, and a figure appeared on the screen. A human. At first glance, the figure was ordinary. A man, dressed in what appeared to be a standard military uniform. His features were stern, yet not hostile. He stood in a room filled with what looked like technology, most of it primitive compared to the Aeronthal's own systems, but it was functional. The humans, Velos realized, had no idea who they were truly speaking to. They had no idea that this moment would determine the course of their future. The man spoke in a language that was somewhat familiar to Velos. It was a derivative of the human tongues that Xerillians had studied, but it was crude, not as refined as the Galactic standard. "I am Captain Ryan Holt, of the United Earth Command," the human said. His voice was firm, unflinching. "I am speaking to you as the representative of Earth. I assume you are the ones responsible for the disturbance we've been experiencing in our atmosphere." Velos's heart raced. The human didn't seem fearful. In fact, he seemed almost calm, composed, like they had been expecting this moment for years, perhaps even longer. "This is Captain Velos of the Cerillian warship Aeronthal," Velos responded, his tone steady but carefully chosen. "We have been observing your planet. We have seen your advancements, your resilience. Your species is far more dangerous than we first realized." The human captain didn't flinch at the words. Instead, he stood straighter, his eyes narrowing with focused intensity. "Dangerous?" Holt repeated, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "I don't think you quite understand, Captain. We are not dangerous because of our weapons or technology. We are dangerous because of our will to survive. Our history is filled with struggles. We've faced extinction before. We've rebuilt from nothing. And we don't give up. You can call it dangerous, but we call it humanity." Velos was taken aback. There was no fear, no hesitation. The human before him seemed completely unshaken by the revelation that a much more advanced species was watching them. Instead, he spoke as if the survival of his kind was a foregone conclusion. The human had said it before. "We don't give up." The captain felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He had expected this to be a negotiation, a battle of wills. But what he was witnessing was not a desperate plea or a show of weakness. The human had already accepted what was to come. It was clear that Earth had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone had guessed. "We didn't send the signal to provoke you," Velos continued, trying to regain control of the conversation. "We were merely investigating your species, testing your survival instincts." Holt's eyes flickered with a knowing look. "You tested us, yes, but we didn't need to be tested. We know who we are. You've seen it in our history. We don't need weapons to survive. We don't need to be the strongest, the smartest, or the most advanced. We just need to be relentless." The transmission paused briefly as the human captain leaned forward, his voice lowering with quiet intensity. "So here's the question for you, Velos. What will you do now? You've seen what we can do. We're not a threat to your people unless we're provoked. But if you push us, if you force us into a corner, just remember, we've survived worse than you could ever imagine." The screen flickered, and the connection went dead. For a moment, there was only silence. Velos stood still, his mind reeling from the conversation he had just witnessed. The human captain had not been intimidated. He had not shown fear, only unwavering confidence in his species' ability to adapt, to survive, and to fight back. As the silence stretched on, Velos turned toward his crew, his face grim. "They know. They've known all along what we're capable of. This isn't just about survival for them. This is about proving they can outlast even the greatest forces in the galaxy. Ralphor shifted uneasily in his seat. Are we too late to stop them from advancing? Velos paused, a cold realization settling in. No, we've underestimated them for too long. They are already a force to be reckoned with. And now, the Exurilians had to decide. Would they try to dominate humanity, or would they attempt to form an uneasy alliance with a species that had already proved its resilience beyond measure? The answer was clear. Either way, humanity was no longer a hidden relic. They were an emerging power, one that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The Aranthal continued its silent watch over Earth, but the mood among the crew had shifted. The transmission with Captain Ryan Holt had shaken Velos to his core. Humanity had not crumbled in the face of the unknown. Instead, they had faced it with the cold, unwavering resolve that had kept their species alive through millennia of war, famine, and struggle. We've made a mistake, Jalik muttered, his hands hovering over the console, analyzing the human transmission. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. Velos stood motionless, staring out the viewport as Earth turned below, the vibrant blues and greens a stark contrast to the cold expanse of space. For all the grandeur of the galaxy, for all its civilizations, none had shown the resilience of humanity. The Exurilians had underestimated them, had failed to account for their tenacity. The humans had made it clear. They were not to be treated like lesser species. The hum of the ship's systems filled the quiet room. Ralphor turned to Velos, his voice tinged with frustration. What now, Captain? They've made their stance clear. The humans won't bow to us. They won't even negotiate on our terms. How do we proceed? Velos took a deep breath, his mind racing. We proceed cautiously, he replied. We don't know everything about them. They have weapons, yes, but they're not relying on them. They rely on something else, something deeper. The communication with Earth had been brief, but Velos had seen enough. Humans were not swayed by intimidation. They didn't bend to superior forces. Their strength lay in their unity, their unyielding spirit. Ryan Holt had spoken not as a representative of a species on the brink of annihilation, but as a people who had endured and learned from centuries of hardship. We need to learn everything we can about their history, Velos continued. What makes them so relentless? Jalik glanced over the data once again, pulling up historical records from Earth's archives. Their history is chaotic. Wars, famines, revolutions, but they've always rebuilt. Every time they've been brought to the brink of destruction, they've come back stronger. Velos nodded grimly. It's their nature. We've seen it in their response to the predator. They don't fight the way other species do. They fight with ingenuity, with unity, with sheer will. But as Velos pondered the situation, a new signal blinked on the communications console. It wasn't a transmission, but a beacon, an encoded message from Earth. The message was short, cryptic, and yet it carried the weight of something far larger than a simple communication. The message read, "We are ready. We will not back down. Humanity will rise." It was a declaration, not of war, but of purpose. There was no fear in the message, only defiance. The humans weren't threatening to destroy. They were simply stating their resolve. They had faced extinction before, and they had rebuilt from it. They were prepared for what came next. They're not afraid of us, Ralphor said quietly, almost as if reading Velos's thoughts. No, Velos replied, his voice filled with reluctant respect. They're not afraid, but that's not the real danger. The danger is that they will fight, not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous. Something we've never encountered before. Jalik asked. Velos looked back at the glowing blue orb of Earth, his expression hard. Yes, they fight with their will, with their refusal to surrender, even when the odds are stacked against them. And that is something the galaxy has never had to face. The crew was silent. The weight of the realization settled in. Humanity wasn't just a species to conquer or subdue. They were a force that would resist with everything they had. Velos had seen it in their eyes, heard it in their voice, And now, they had made their intentions clear. "We need to decide what to do next," Velos said, his voice firm. "We've been watching them, testing them, but we have underestimated them for too long. We can either continue with our mission and risk a confrontation, or we can try to understand them, find a way to coexist." The Aeronful floated in the darkness of space, its sleek, shimmering form a silent sentinel hovering above Earth. Inside the ship, the crew gathered around the central command hub, awaiting the crucial transmission. Captain Velos stood at the forefront, his expression unreadable, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The time for observation was over. The time for understanding had come. But whether that understanding would lead to peace or conflict remained uncertain. "We're ready, Captain," Rolfer announced, his voice steady but laced with tension. "The channel is open." Velos took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room. The faces of his crew were grim, their features marked by the same uncertainty he himself felt. This was not just a mission anymore. It had evolved into something far more significant. The fate of the galaxy was hanging in the balance, and humanity, those seemingly insignificant primitive beings, was the key. "Open the transmission," Velos ordered, his voice firm. The screen flickered to life, revealing the same human captain from before. Ryan Holt stood before the camera, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp with the weight of their last exchange. The human was calm, almost as though he had been expecting this moment for a long time. "This is Captain Velos of the Cerulean warship Aeronful," Velos began, his voice cutting through the silence. "We are not your enemies, Captain Holt. We come not to conquer, but to understand." For a brief moment, Holt didn't speak. He simply regarded the screen, his eyes unwavering. Then, when he finally did respond, his tone was measured, yet heavy with meaning. "I knew this was coming," Holt said. "Your species doesn't come to make peace easily. I've seen enough of the galaxy to understand that much. But you've been watching us for a long time, haven't you? Testing us, trying to figure out what we are." Velos didn't flinch. "Yes, we have. Your species is unlike anything we've encountered. We thought you were primitive, but you've shown us that we were wrong. You are a force to be reckoned with." Holt's gaze softened, but there was no smile, no relief in his eyes. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Every species in the galaxy thinks we're a curiosity," he said. "A fluke. And for a long time, I thought we were. But humanity, we've survived because we don't give up. We don't bend, no matter what you throw at us. Our strength isn't in our weapons. It's in our refusal to quit. It's in our unity, our adaptability. And that is something you can't measure." Velos absorbed his words, feeling the weight of them settle deep within him. This was not a species that would fall easily. The humans were not driven by fear or ambition in the way other species were. They were driven by something deeper, an unyielding will to exist, to persist, no matter the odds. "I don't want war," Velos said finally, his voice steady. "I came here to learn, to understand, and I believe it is still possible for our species to coexist." Holt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried a deep seriousness. "I've seen the destruction you Exarilians are capable of. I've read the reports, studied your history, and I know that if we're going to survive, we can't afford to be complacent. We won't roll over for anyone, but we don't want to fight you. Not if we don't have to." Velos nodded slowly, feeling the truth of Holt's words resonate in his chest. The human was right. There was no room for complacency. If humanity was to rise, they would do so on their own terms, not because the Exarilians had decided their fate. "So we must find a way to live in the same galaxy," Velos said, his voice firming with conviction. "Not as enemies, but as equals. There is much we can learn from one another. Perhaps it's time for us to acknowledge that humanity has the right to shape its own destiny." Holt's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Maybe we can do that. Maybe we can find a way to coexist. But understand this, Captain Velos. If you cross us, if you threaten us or our people, we will fight back. And we will not stop until we've won." The finality in his voice left no room for doubt. Humanity would not be pushed around. They had endured too much, fought too hard, to fall victim to another empire. But there was an openness to peace, an openness to finding common ground. Holt was not offering submission, but cooperation, on humanity's terms. The transmission ended, and the room was quiet. Velos turned to face his crew, his expression resolute. "We've been given a chance," he said quietly. "We must take it. If we want to avoid conflict, we must acknowledge humanity's strength and their right to choose their path." As the crew of the Aronthal digested the conversation, Velos felt a deep sense of change within him. This was not the outcome he had expected. Humanity had shown him that strength was not defined by firepower or technology. It was defined by will, by the refusal to break. The humans had made their intentions clear. They would not bend to anyone. And if the Xyrillians wanted peace, they would have to find a way to coexist with a species that was now determined to shape its own future. For the first time, Velos wondered if the Xyrillians had made the right decision in underestimating Earth. And in the days to come, the galaxy would find out just how dangerous humanity could be, not because they were the most powerful, but because they would never stop fighting for their place in the universe. Ralpher met his captain's gaze. "We can't just ignore them. They're already advancing faster than we can anticipate. If we don't act soon, we may find ourselves at war with a species we have no hope of defeating." Velos stood still for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The Xyrillians had always seen themselves as the superior force in the galaxy, a civilization that commanded respect. But humanity was different. They weren't just surviving. They were evolving in ways that defied all expectations. "We'll open a channel," Velos said finally, his voice decisive. "This isn't about domination. This is about understanding. We need to speak to them directly, without threats, without force. It's time to find out if they're truly as resolute in peace as they are in war." As the communication systems were prepared, Velos felt the full weight of the moment. This was no longer just about power. It was about understanding the force humanity had become. And in that understanding, the Xyrillians would find their answer. Would humanity rise to become an ally, or an unstoppable foe? The next conversation would decide.